is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're looking at the Samsung Series 7 Slate. This is an 11.6-inch Windows Slate that weighs only 2 pounds, and it runs on a second generation Intel Core i5 CPU. It has a both touchscreen and an active digitizer for use with the pen. The Samsung Series 7 Slate obviously has a very wide aspect ratio. This is a widescreen, not a 4:3 aspect ratio display, so ergonomically speaking, it could be a little bit awkward for those of you who are graphic artists who might prefer something a bit more squared off, but obviously it's wonderful for watching movies because of the widescreen. For a Windows tablet, this is very thin and light. It weighs only 2 pounds. That's even less than the Asus E-Slate that we reviewed. I think you know that I like that quite a bit. This guy is even lighter, and it's a bit faster too, since it has a second generation 1.6 gigahertz Core i5. Let's take a look around. We've got our little home button here, sort of looks like the Samsung Flash Windows Phone, and that brings up the launcher that we'll take a look at in detail later, but first a tour of the device. Here we've got the dock connector port, and this is the dock. Very, very compact. And on the back of the dock you've got your Ethernet port, the full-size HDMI port, there's a micro HDMI on the device itself, and one USB port along with a 3.5mm stereo jack and the charging port back here. And this guy folds down for travel. Nice quality combination of metal and plastic. And here's the side, and you've got, this is your orientation lock button and your illuminated power button right here. You can see it's very thin. There's your microphone hole, micro SD card slot, another microphone hole for noise canceling. And over here we've got the single USB port with an incredibly silly little cover plug. I know they wanted to keep the look clean, so they put a cover on this guy, but here it is, 20 seconds and you're going to lose it. And that is the only USB port on this device, one USB 2.0 port. Here's your combo mic headphone jack, your volume buttons, pretty easy to accidentally hit, they just take a light touch. Micro HDMI port right here, and your charging port. And the back of the device shows some fingerprints. It kind of reminds me of the gray version of the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 Android tablet. It's made to look like brushed metal, however it is plastic. It's not too cheesy looking. Certainly the E-Slate did not have a very classy back. It was beautiful from the front but not from the back, so can't complain. 3 megapixel camera here, there's a 2 megapixel on the front, and lots of heat vents. Now so far this guy's run pretty cool and quiet for us. The first couple of days that you get it, it may be indexing files for Windows search, but once it calms down and gets that done. The tablet isn't cheap. It runs anywhere from about $1,049 up to $1,400. For that you get some pretty decent specs. You get a 64 or 128 gig SSD, and boy, this thing boots and reboots very quickly. It's amazing. It has 4 gigs of RAM soldered on the motherboard, so that's not expandable. Bluetooth 3.0, Wi-Fi 802.11bgn, dual cameras, and the 11.6-inch 1366 by 768 display, along with that Core i5 that we mentioned, second generation, and Intel HD 3000 graphics, which are more than good enough to play video, to play casual games, certainly, even some light gaming with something like Left 4 Dead 2. Certainly it's good enough for Minecraft, Photoshop, Art Rage, Corel Painter, those kind of things. It can handle it just fine. It's going to be a little bit faster than the Asus E-Slate because that had a first generation Core i5, and you'll notice the difference when you're using Photoshop and applying filters and doing transforms, that kind of thing. And in terms of office applications, yeah, no problem here. What are the drawbacks with the Slate? Well, the viewing angles on this display, it's gorgeous if you look at it straight ahead. Really nice saturated colors. Samsung knows how to do that. We've seen that in the Galaxy Tab 10, but lateral viewing angles, it can really disappear. Between the glare on the display and the fact it just doesn't have very wide viewing angles, those are not very good. So you're going to want to look at this dead on, especially if you're a graphic artist type and you care about your color accuracy. In terms of color accuracy, it seems fairly neutral. It doesn't have a color bias per se, so it's good for graphic artist types in that respect. So since this has a second generation Core i5 CPU clocked at 1.6 gigahertz with Intel HD 3000 integrated graphics, which are quite capable for everyday use, this has no problem handling MS Office. And here we've got OneNote up here, and we're going to test it out. And we're going to recognize that text and see how it does. And so we press and hold on it. You can see it has its suggestions right here. The top one is the correct one. And it's quite quick. This is definitely fine for using OneNote. Better than fine, in fact. Honestly, a Core i5, even a ULV CPU, is more powerful than most people need for anything that's web, office, email related. It can also handle Photoshop very well. And we're going to take a look at ArtRage next for those of you who are graphic artists. This has a dual digitizer. This has both the capacitive touchscreen with multi-touch, and it has a Wacom digitizer. It's got the standard WinTab drivers installed. It doesn't have Photoshop drivers installed by default for pressure sensitivity. We're going to take a look at ArtRage, which uses the same drivers as Windows right now. So here we are in ArtRage, and we'll just pick a color, and you can see pressure sensitivity right here. I'm going lightly. Now I'm going to press heavy. I'm going very lightly, and now I'm going to press heavily. So you've got good control there with that. Switch to a different kind of brush, and you can get the sideways thing going. Definitely pleasing for graphic artists. Again, I'm not sure that this aspect ratio, this extreme widescreen, is ideal for drawing, but it's pretty good. It does a decent job with dealing with vectoring if you touch with your hand and touch with the pen, but you really need to touch the pen down first to avoid any kind of vectoring. And you can see now we're not getting any weird lines or anything like that. But if I touch down first with my knuckle and then draw, it vectors. So that's something to keep in mind. You have to touch the pen down first when you're drawing, and then rest your hand on the screen. The tablet comes with Windows 7, and we've got Windows 7 Professional on this with Service Pack 1, because this is the high-end configuration with the 128 gig SSD, and it also comes bundled with that dock as a deal right now. Sometimes you can get both the dock and the keyboard for around $1,349 to $1,400. Now I have to say, Windows 7 is usually not glorious to use with touch, especially if you have a smaller display, since it was really designed for 12.1 inches and up, but this works so well. You can just see I'm actually successfully touching targets and say I want to open up a group over here, no problem. I want to close the group, and even though these are pretty small, it's working really well. So if you've been frustrated by Windows tablets before, you'll find this more enjoyable. It's not going to be an iPad-like experience still because it's not built for touch. But guess what? Samsung has an answer to that, and the fact they make Android tablets has helped. They have their own custom launcher here, which is very much like a consumer tablet experience. So you've got handy stuff here. You've got your weather, the time, your battery status, Wi-Fi, and what network you're connected to. You can set up to-dos over here. And you've got this launcher over here of all the built-in programs. And if you want to tap down here, you can switch between screens. And if you want to add anything that you've installed later, it does not automatically come here, but you can add them to the launcher dock. So giant, finger-friendly, very familiar if you're used to using an Android tablet or an iPad too. So say we want to check out YouTube. And basically just launches the browser and takes us to YouTube. And here we are on the full YouTube site. Clearly, since this is a Windows machine, it can handle playing anything that's on YouTube. Well, now let's check out Hulu, and you can see the on-screen keyboard. So this is the standard Windows keyboard here, and you can resize this to suit yourself. So if you need a bigger keyboard, you can just grab it and you can stretch it around. And we'll just pick something from the front page. And this is a Wi-Fi only Windows tablet, so we're streaming over an 802.11n network right now. The following program is brought to you. Not super duper loud, decent for a tablet. And it popped out to full screen mode. Works just fine. Speakers actually are not too bad. They're reasonably loud. Press the little home button, it takes you back to that desktop, just like that. Samsung includes their own notes application here, and by the way, here it comes with a pen. There is no silo to put this in, probably because the tablet's so thin. This pen is actually thicker than the tablet is. But it's nice to have a notes application here. So that's Samsung's Note application. And we've got things like their calendar, their to-do. It's kind of like the Androidification of Windows. It's pretty funny. This looks an awful lot like the stuff that they offer on their Galaxy Tab line. And we'll take a look at Windows Journal. Now here's something where you really can write directly on the screen. And I have terrible handwriting, so you probably can't read that, but you get the idea. And then you can circle stuff and recognize it. Now I've just written atrociously, so it may not have much luck there. It actually did a pretty good job of recognizing nasty, nasty scrawl. And you got the inline corrections here for words that it figures it probably didn't figure out. So great for you school note-taker types, or you work note-taker types, or anybody who takes notes. You got Bing Maps preloaded here. This is a Microsoft signature setup. That means that they clean up the bloatware basically, and they put a couple of their own things on here like Zune and Bing Maps. And we've got access to Twitter loaded, social dashboard, some other stuff. So for those of you who want to use this not just as a Windows tablet, but you want to use it as more of like a leisure tablet in front of the couch, it is doing a pretty good job of bridging both worlds. One thing to keep in mind for you early adopters, now right now we're in the first week of December 2011, so in case you're watching this a year from now, you probably don't have to worry about this, but this has only been on sale for a couple of weeks. It's pretty hard to find. It's mostly at the Microsoft store. It's just starting to appear on Amazon and some other stores, but the first run of these guys had a problem with the display lifting. The UV adhesive hadn't been fully cured. And in fact, this tablet has a little bit of a lift in one corner, and if you run this with a black background, you can see in a dark room that in two corners there's light leakage. So if you do buy this tablet, check those things out before you throw away your receipt. So who's this tablet for? Well, assuming you've got the money to buy it, because it's on the expensive side. It's obviously great for note takers, students, those folks who are at work and need to take handwritten notes. It's good for working with graphic arts type stuff. So for those of you who are digital artists, the active digitizer, this pen that's included, it's wonderful for that, with the caveat that it does have a very widescreen aspect ratio, and there is glare, and viewing angles are not super wide, but as long as you're looking at it pretty much head on, it works just fine. So I think it's okay for that. This is also for anybody who wants both the utility of this kind of friendly, it's a consumer tablet experience, combined with everything that Windows does. This is a full Windows 7 computer. Granted, there's no keyboard here. As I mentioned, there are bundles available where you can get Samsung's Bluetooth keyboard, but you can use any Bluetooth keyboard that you like with this. You can use a USB keyboard, a USB hub. You can plug that in and use the keyboard and the mouse if you want it, and turn this into a viable real computer. In fact, you could use this as a desktop replacement because it's reasonably powerful for those of you who just do things like web, email, office work, that kind of stuff, work with ArtRate, work with Photoshop, maybe do some Illustrator and even a little Flash development. Is this better than the E-Slate, which is really last generation model? Well, that depends. The E-Slate doesn't have quite as vibrant and colorful a display, but it does have wider viewing angle. It's also a bit bigger and heavier. It weighs about half a pound more. It does have a ½ inch more screen size, and it's not quite as widescreen as this. If I was a graphic artist, I would be tempted by the E-Slate still, but this guy does have more processing power, and that's something to keep in mind. And since this was actually handed out with a pre-release version of Windows 8 to some Windows developers, we know that this guy's going to run well with Windows 8 with the new Metro UI. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. This is the Samsung Series 7 Slate. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.